The wind came in low and hard off the mountains, sweeping the snow sideways like white knives. She leaned forward in the saddle, hat brim pulled low, the buffalo coat heavy on her shoulders. The horse's breath steamed in the dimming light, each exhale a plume that vanished into the storm. Behind her lay the open prairie, bare and brittle under the season's grip. Ahead, the yellow glow of the saloon's windows cut faint shapes into the night. Inside, the air was thick with heat and whiskey, and the low rasp of cards sliding over a scarred table. Men glanced up when the door banged open, letting in a swirl of snow. She stepped inside, stamping her boots, her gaze steady and unreadable. Conversations lowered to murmurs. The sheriff was here. He sat at a table near the back, not in uniform. He didn't need it to mark his place in the room. The cut of his coat, the polish of his boots, and the deliberate way he poured his drink said more than any badge. He smiled when he saw her, a slow curve that didn't reach his eyes. "Evening," he said, his voice smooth, practiced. "Thought you'd be smart enough to come see me, without waiting for me to come find you." She kept her gloves on as she walked to his table. "You wanted to talk about my land. I wanted to talk about your future." He gestured to the empty chair across from him. She didn't sit. "Your father left you with a fine piece of range. Trouble is, it's a hard thing to protect alone. Winter's only going to get meaner. Outlaws are sniffing round the edges. You'd be better off with someone to look after you." Her pulse thudded in her ears, but she didn't look away. "If you've got something to say it." His smile widened, almost amused. "Marry me. We put your brand and mine together. You'll have the safest spread in the territory. Ain't no man would dare cross you. And you'll have the sheriff in your bed instead of on your doorstep." The room was too warm. She heard the rattle of poker chips somewhere behind her, the lazy creak of a chair. She thought of the boy back at the ranch, the way he'd lit the stove that morning without being asked. She thought of her father's voice, warning her once. "Some men ain't a skin when they ask." "No," she said. The word was clean, without apology. His eyes changed, just a flicker, the warmth pulling back to reveal something harder beneath. "I don't think you understand," he said, his tone still even but the edges sharp. "This ain't a question for you to answer wrong." I understood fine. The silence between them stretched. He tapped the rim of his glass with a fingertip. The sound small, but sharp enough to feel. "You'll wish you'd thought on it longer," he said at last. She turned and left before he could see the quick rise of her breath. The cold outside hit like a slap, but it felt cleaner than the air she left behind. Snow clawed at her coat, stung her cheeks as she crossed to her horse. From a saloon window, he watched her mount up, his figure a dark shape against the lamplight. Men around him said nothing. They'd seen enough to know trouble when it started breathing in the room. The ride home was long and near lightless. The snow deepened with every mile, the trail vanishing beneath her. Wind howled across the ridges, carrying the smell of frozen pine. She kept her shoulders square, but the memory of his voice clung like frost inside her ribs. Halfway to the ranch, she caught movement in the trees, a flicker of shadow. For a moment she thought it might be wolves, but nothing followed. Still, she felt the weight of being watched, the sense that the storm wasn't the only thing trailing her through the dark. By the time she reached the low lights of her house, her fingers were numb around the reins. She stabled the horse, brushing the ice from its mane, and stepped into the quiet warmth inside. The boy looked up from the fire, eyes bright, relief flashing across his face. "You're late," he said. "Storm's bad," she answered, shrugging off her coat. He studied her for a moment, as if sensing something she wasn't saying, then nodded and went back to tending the flames. Outside, the wind keened against the windows. Somewhere far off, a branch snapped in the woods. She stood by the fire, her shadow stretched across the floor, knowing that the storm would pass. But what waited on the other side of it might be worse. The blizzard thickened through the night, drumming its icy fingers on the roof and pressing against the walls with the weight of an unending tide. She rose before dawn, stoking the fire and checking the latch on the back door, the kind of small, necessary rituals that kept a person alive out here. The boy was still sleeping, curled tight beneath a quilt patched with scraps from another lifetime. She moved quietly, pouring the last of yesterday's coffee into a tin cup and setting it on the stove to warm. By mid-morning, the snow was a wall beyond the window, the sky and ground welded into one seamless white. The wind wailed down from the high ridges, shaking the shutters, finding every weakness in the boards. She kept herself busy, mending a tear in her coat, sharpening the old knife. But her thoughts circled back, again and again, to the look in the sheriff's eyes when she told him no. The knock came hard and sudden. 3 sharp raps that cut clean to the howl of the wind. She froze, hand resting on the table. The boy stirred in his sleep, but didn't wake. Crossing the room, she opened the door a hand's width. Snow rushed in, blinding for a moment. The sheriff stood there, his hat crusted white, coat collar pulled high. His smile was smaller than it had been in the saloon, but no less deliberate. Got word the trapper's taken a fall on the ridge. Broke his leg bad. Thought you want to come see to him. Her grip on the door tightened. Where? Too far to walk in this weather. I've got my horse ready. Storm will bury him if we wait. She glanced back at the boy, still sleeping near the fire, then stepped outside, pulling the door shut behind her. I'll ride my own. He shook his head, already moving toward his horse. Trail's too narrow, too slick. We ride double. Best we hurry. The wind bit through her gloves as she mounted up behind him, her jaw clenched against both cold and unease. They set off at a trot, snow stinging her face, the world ahead reduced to a blur of white and shadow. The sheriff's coat smelled faintly of tobacco and something metallic, sharp in the cold air. Minutes passed, maybe longer. Time had a way of bending in a storm, before she realized they weren't climbing toward the ridge where the trapper often hunted. The land here was different. The trees denser, the ground sloping in ways she didn't recognize. She shifted slightly, trying to see past his shoulder. This isn't the way, she said. He didn't answer. The horse kept moving, hooves muffled by the drifts. Where's the trapper? Her voice was harder now. He slowed, just enough of the wind to fill the silence between them. You think you can turn me down in front of half the town and ride away clean? Thought maybe you'd see sense in the cold, away from all those eyes. She felt the muscles in his back tighten beneath her hands. He urged the horse forward again, faster this time, until they broke from the trees onto a high ridge. The world dropped away on the far side, a steep fall to a frozen river far below. Snow blew across the edge in restless sheets, erasing and remaking the ground with every gust. She swung her leg over, dropping to the snow, boots sinking deep. I'm not marrying you. His expression didn't change, but the way his eyes fixed on her made the cold sharper. Then you ain't anything. The shove came quick, no warning, no time to brace. Her boots slid. The edge vanished beneath her, and then there was nothing but air and snow and the roar of her own heartbeat. The slope slammed into her side, knocking the breath from her lungs. She tumbled, body twisting, ice and rock battering her until she hit the riverbank below. Pain flared white-hot along her ribs. She lay still, staring up at the cliff, the snow already softening the outlines of his figure above. He watched for a moment, then turned his horse and rode away, the sound of hooves swallowed almost instantly by the storm. The cold pressed in fast, merciless. She tried to push herself up, but her legs trembled and her breath came ragged. Snowflakes drifted onto her face, melting against her skin before freezing again. Somewhere nearby, the river murmured beneath its crust of ice. She thought of the boy, alone in the house. She thought of the trapper, somewhere out in this same storm, maybe not even knowing what had happened. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of pine and smoke, faint but real. She turned her head toward it, teeth gritted against the pain, and began to crawl, each movement an effort against the weight of the cold. Above her, the ridge was empty now, the sheriff's trail already filling in with fresh snow. Darkness pressed in, broken only by the faint crackle of fire. Her first thought was that she was dead, but then the pain came, sharp in her ribs, heavy in her chest, and with it, the smell of wood smoke. She blinked into the flickering light, finding rough-hewn walls of stone and the low ceiling of a cave. A blanket of fur covered her, its weight both suffocating and anchoring. The old trapper sat near the fire, his back bent, steam curling from the cup in his hand. Snow and ice clung to his beard like frost on a pine. His eyes flicked to her, without surprise. "Found you near froze on the riverbank," he said, voice gravel from years in the wind. "Wasn't much time left in you." Her lips were cracked, the words rasping. "How long?" "Day and a night. Storm still gnawing on the world. You're safe here for now." He poured steaming water into a tin and handed it to her. "Drink slow." The heat burned her tongue, but she drank anyway, feeling the life creep back into her fingers. Images flickered in her mind. The cliff edge, the sheriff's hand, the endless white. Anger rose sharp and clean, pushing back the ache in her bones. "He thinks I'm dead," she said. The trapper stared into the flames for a long moment before answering. "Best keep it that way till you're ready. Go riding it now. You won't make it past the first street." "I can't just—" "You can," he interrupted, voice low but edged. "And you will. Storm's giving you cover. Use it to heal. Use it to think. A wound's no time for rashness." She lay back, the blanket heavy over her, but her mind refused rest. She thought of the boy alone at the ranch, the fire he'd tend, the way he'd watch the windows when the wind rose. The sheriff wouldn't leave the land be. Men like him didn't let go of a thing once their hands were on it. The days passed in a blur of pain and silence. The storm held its ground, sealing the world in white. She learned the shape of the cave, the rhythm of the trapper's movements, the smell of dried meat when it hit the pan. Sometimes she woke to find him gone, returned hours later with wood or snares, his boots crusted with ice. She mended slowly. The ache in her side dulled but didn't vanish. Her hands grew steadier, her steps more certain. The trapper watched her with the same quiet he gave the fire, neither pushing nor holding her back. One evening, as the wind screamed like a living thing outside, she spoke without looking at him. "When the storm breaks, I'm going back." He didn't lift his gaze from the flames. "Not without a plan, you ain't." "I have one." "Tell me." She hesitated, then laid it out. The sheriff's stolen tax money hidden in the old mill, the handful of townsfolk who'd suffer him gone, the truth she could turn loose if she lived to speak it. The trapper listened without interrupting, nodding once when she finished. "That'll stir the hornets. Sure enough. But you'll need more than truth and a rifle. You'll need the boy." Her jaw tightened. "I won't put him in more danger." "You already did," he said simply. "He's got eyes. He's been watching. If he's smart, he's hiding what you taught him to hide." The truth of it settled heavy in her chest. She saw the boy's face in her mind, not fearful, but set the way it had been the night she told him to lock the door when the wind turned. By the fourth day, the storm began to weaken, the wind screamed falling to a restless murmur. A pale light seeped into the cave mouth, casting the snow outside in shades of blue and silver. She stepped out into it, breath sharp in her lungs. The world was changed. Trees bent under the weight of ice, the river a ribbon of frozen glass. The sky washed clean but still watchful. The trapper joined her, pulling his coat tight. "You ride back now. It'll be quiet for a day. After that, the wolves will start moving, two-legged ones first." She mounted the trapper's spare horse, the saddle cold beneath her. Her ribs ached with every movement, but her grip on the reins was steady. The boy's face, the sheriff's smirk, the land itself, all of it pulled her forward. The trapper fell in beside her, without a word. Snow crunched beneath the horse's hooves, each step carrying them closer to the edge of what waited. In the distance, the hills rolled out toward the town, and the memory of the cliff lay behind her like an unfinished sentence. The town lay quiet under a thin veil of morning fog. The snow packed hard in the streets from boots and wagon wheels. Smoke rose from chimneys in thin, crooked lines, carrying the smell of pine and coffee. The sheriff stood on the porch of his office, coat open despite the cold, one hand resting on the butt of his pistol. His eyes scanned the street with the lazy arrogance of a man who believed he owned it. She rode in slow, the trapper at her side, the boy behind him, bundled in the trapper's spare coat. Hooves struck the frozen ground with rhythm that carried down the street, drawing faces to the windows. A few men stepped from doorways to watch, eyes narrowing as they recognized her. The murmur started low, passing from one to the next like wind through dry grass. The sheriff's expression didn't change when he saw her, but something flickered in his stance. A tightening of the jaw, a shift of weight. "Thought you were dead," he called, his voice carrying easily in the thin air. "You didn't think hard enough," she said, swinging down from her horse. Her ribs protested, but she ignored it, walking toward him with a rifle balanced loosely in her hands. The trapper stopped a few paces back, the boy's small hand gripping his coat. The sheriff let his eyes drift to the watching crowd before settling back on her. "You come to make another mistake?" "I came to end one," she said. She stopped at the bottom of the steps, the cold between them sharp as broken glass. "Your days of taking what you want are done. You'll leave this town before nightfall. You'll leave with nothing." He laughed, short and humorless. "And who's going to make me?" "You." Her voice stayed low, steady. "I've got your stolen tax money. I've got names of the people you bled dry. I can hand them to the town right now, or you can walk away breathing." The silence was sudden and deep. The townsfolk shifted, eyes darting between them. The sheriff's hand hovered just above his pistol. "You think they'll take your word over mine? They won't have to." She nodded toward the trapper, who held up a small burlap sack. Coins clinked inside, heavy and undeniable. The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "You think you won something here?" "I've kept what's mine. That's more than you'll have." He stepped down a single stair, close enough for her to see the fine cracks in the skin around his mouth, the faint sheen of sweat on his temple, despite the cold. "You should have taken my hand when I offered. Could have spared yourself a world of trouble. You shoved me off a cliff," she said. "Trouble's already done." The move came fast. His hand dropped his gun, the leather of the holster creaking. Her rifle was already up, her finger firm on the trigger. The shot cracked the air, splintering the quiet. His pistol spun from his grip, clattering into the snow. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some stepped back. Others leaned forward, hungry for the end of it. "You've got until sundown," she said. "After that, the next shot won't be for your hand." For a heartbeat, it seemed he might back away. Then his shoulders shifted, and she saw it. The same stubborn cruelty that had driven him to the cliff. He lunged for the fallen pistol. Her second shot dropped him where he stood. He fell face first into the snow, red seeping out in a slow, blooming stain. The street was silent except for the faint creak of a swinging sign. She lowered the rifle, her breath clouding the cold air. No one moved to stop her. The trapper stepped forward, tossing the burlap sack into the waiting hands of a shopkeeper, who stared down at it as though it might vanish. Murmurs began again, rising into voices, low at first, then stronger. The boy came to her side, eyes wide but unafraid. She rested a hand briefly on his shoulder. "Let's go home," she said. They left the town without hurry, the sound of their horses fading into the white silence of the hills. By the time they reached the ridge above the river, the sun was slipping low, the light turning the snow to gold. She dismounted and stood at the cliff's edge, looking down at the place where she had fallen. The wind here was gentler now, carrying no threat, only the smell of pine and thawing earth. She thought of her father's voice, of the storm's cruel hand, of the faces in town as the truth took root. Winter had not broken her. It had shown her the marrow of who she was. She turned back to the others, the boy already grinning at some quiet joke from the trapper. The land stretched out before them, wide and waiting. Without a word, she mounted again, and they rode toward the horizon, leaving the shadow of the cliff behind for good.